just make a start. I'd like to say hello and welcome to everyone today to this webinar on finding and using accessible texts. My name is Shirley Lawson. I am delighted to be hosting the session and would like to introduce you to my Call Scotland colleague and friend, Paul Nisbet, who is going to talk about why the provision of learning materials in accessible formats is a fundamental requirement and where you can find these texts. So the webinar will last approximately 20 minutes and then there'll be time for questions at the end. But please do type your questions into the chat pane, even as you think of them. If you go to the bottom right-hand side to the purple chevron and just open that up, you'll see the little chat bubble. So put your questions in there and we'll have a look at them when Paul is finished presenting. And keep checking the chat pane because I will be putting in links too of things that Paul is talking about. Okay, without further ado, I will hand over to you, Paul.
Great, thanks, Shirley. Could you stop sharing yours and I'll start sharing mine?
Sure.
So hello everybody, and we've only got 20 minutes, so pile straight in. And if, as Shirley says, if there's anything that you'd want to ask about, then just pop the questions into the tab pane. So we'll go to this one, we'll share the system audio, and off we go. So I'm hoping that you can see a large PowerPoint slide, can you?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so just a wee reminder of the legislative background to this, apart from being very good practice, and obviously it's essential for our learners to access the curriculum successfully through accessible texts, but it's also a legislative requirement. So we've got a couple of slides here. They're focused on Scotland, but it does apply to other countries and internationally as well. So additional support for learning in Scotland, the Education Authority must make adequate and efficient provision for such additional support as is required by each child. It places a duty on the Education Authority with regard to individual children or young people with additional support needs. Accessibility legislation and the Equality Act, so this is another Scottish version of the of what the Equality Act means. It requires responsible bodies, local authorities, to improve communication with disabled pupils, and any information that's provided in writing for pupils should be provided in appropriate alternative formats. So that, you know, historically that would have been large print or braille or other printed formats, but nowadays we're talking about digital. The Equality Act itself, there's some technical guidance for schools in Scotland and England and Wales and Northern Ireland. So 6.1.1 places a duty on local authorities to make reasonable adjustments and to take positive steps to ensure that disabled pupils can fully participate in education and that they can enjoy other benefits, facilities and services that the school provides for pupils. So they give a wee example of that. A visually impaired child requires larger printed handouts to be prepared in 24 point or larger. This is deemed or regarded in the technical guidance as a reasonable adjustment because it's relatively easy to do by changing your word file or whatever it is to make a larger font before you print it. So in a digital world, then we're expecting the same kind of thing to happen. So with that in mind, we are going to take a look at 4 different sources for accessible textbooks. This is not about teachers producing materials, this is about where you can find accessible textbooks. So we'll take a look at the Call Scotland Books for All website, RNIB Education Collection, or otherwise known as Bookshare, the National Accessible Library, and a couple of things about commercial ebooks. So I'll stop there and we will go to the very first one on our list. And I'm hoping you can see the Books for All website, Robert, can we? Robert?
Yes, you can. Sorry.
Really good. So this is our first one. This is Books for All, and it was created by us in Call Scotland about 10 years ago. And it was the first of its type. No, it wasn't the first of its type, actually. The Seeing Ear was the first of its type in the UK. But essentially what we wanted to do was provide a mechanism for people to share accessible versions of text. So I've logged in. It's one of these ones where you require an account, and accounts are free to anybody, or almost anybody. Robert checks them to make sure that you're not bona fide. They are bona fide, because we can't have files being downloaded from the website and sprinkled liberally around the internet, because these files are only for learners who have got a print disability. So let's just see how it works. I'm going to do a search for more Pergo, and there's a variety of books written by the author coming up here. And I'm going to choose Kensuke's Kingdom. I'll try that again. So here's the books that we've got. Now you'll see that almost all of them are large print, and that's because they've been created by practitioners across Scotland, originally for learners who required paper, and they've kindly provided them to us because we're allowed to share them with other organisations that require these large print versions. So if I wanted to download this book, I would type in a learner, and this is really more for your benefit, so that you can create a record of the learners for whom you've downloaded the books, and then you would click download it now, or create a link to share. If you wanted to send the link to a student, then you could create a link and send it with an email, and then they would be able to download the book. So I'm not going to waste time going through the process. I'm just going to swap to an example of the file that I've just downloaded. Now it's a PDF, so you can use a variety of different tools to read it. And here I've opened it up in Edge, the Microsoft Edge browser. And so we've got some control over what the file does. We can make it bigger or smaller. We can change the page view to be single page or two page. And we can also have it read out. And I'm hoping that I remembered to select the system audio. So we'll try this.
Seven. Chapter 1. Peggy Sue. 8. I disappeared on the night before my 12th birthday. The 28th of July, 1988. Only now can I at last tell the whole extraordinary story, the true story. Kensuke made me promise that I...
Okay, so did that come through, folks? Could you hear the audio?
Yes, there was a slight echo, but it came through.
Okay, right. Okay, thanks. So that's our first example. And our second example, so you could do a search for author or the title of the book, or you could try and do a search for the subject. And in this case, if you search for math, you'd get 163 results. So you'd probably want to be a bit more refined in the kind of books you're looking for. But so you can see the kind of thing we've got. Some of them are large print, or some of them are scanned PDF. And I want to just show you one example here of the SHM primary maths books. And so we've got the whole series of SHM, and we've added answer boxes to them. So I will show you what that means in practice. So here's one I have downloaded earlier in true Blue Peter fashion. And it's the Scottish Heinemann Maths shape workbook number 2. Now, we did these quite a few years ago, when SHM was probably one of the most popular maths series in primary schools in Scotland. Since now, of course, we've got TJ and Lecky primary maths, so it's not as commonly used, and of course Heinemann active maths as well. But I want to show you what's significant about them, and basically it's because we've got answer boxes, then you can type in your answers to these questions here, and you can also use the the drawing tools, either on your PC or on your iPad or your Chromebook, to answer the questions like that. So that could be quite helpful for some learners who've got a physical difficulty with holding a pencil and handwriting. Right, where are we? So I want to, we want to think about how we can access these files on Windows, which is obviously what we've just done here, and also on iPad. So I'll connect up my iPad. And we'll take a look at what it looks like on an iPad. Bear with me for a minute.
We can see the iPad.
Great, okay. So this is a book just downloaded from the Books for All website, and it's opened in the Books app on the iPad. And it's a PDF file again, so we can make it slightly bigger and we can read through the book, and with the iPad Speak selection,
They've gone now, and I'm alone at last. I have the whole night ahead of me, and I won't waste a single moment of it. I shan't sleep it away. I won't dream it away either. I mustn't, because every moment of it will be far too precious.
so we should have books, the Books app on your iPads, and so the very simplest thing we can do is open it up into Books and access it that way. I want to show you another example here, and this time it's a TJ book, and this has been downloaded from the website. And as I say, this is one of the ones that's got these answer boxes, and this time I've opened up in an app called PDF Expert, which is both free and paid for. And the advantage of the PDF Expert is that you can type into these answer boxes on the screen. So we can pop there, select the answer, and if you knew what it was, you would put in the correct answer. So PDF Expert is that app there. Right, now I want to go back to Books for All website, and just to pick out a few other things about the website. The first one is when we go up to, actually Robert, can you now see the Books for All website again?
Yes, we can.
Very good, okay. So go up to collections, and just to let folk know, we've collected all the Scottish texts for English National 5 and higher here, and giving you links to them. Most of these are scanned books, so they're scanned PDFs, and also we've added in where you can buy them from Amazon Kindle and the Apple Books, because as we'll see in a minute, some of it can be an advantage of actually buying the commercial books. PDFs are good, but Kindle books and the EPUB files that are available from Apple have got some advantages. So that's the Scottish set text. Another thing I want to draw your attention to is the Book Award tab. And every year we produce accessible versions of the Scottish Book Trust Award books. So this is an annual event, and there are two sets of prizes. There's the Book Bug picture book prize. These are books that are provided to everyone, every student, every pupil in primary 1, and also the Scottish Teenage Book Prize. And the point of this is to provide accessible versions so that students can read them on their devices, and also so that they can take part in the voting for the book that they want best. So if we looked at Inch and Grub, for example, story about cavemen, which must be particularly appropriate for people like me, then you can see that we've got a variety of these in different formats. We have Keynote, and that's the iPad version of PowerPoint, and a PowerPoint recorded narration. So this is a version, but with a real person doing the narration. One that's designed for Switch users, one that's designed for accessing on Grid and on PC, and another one that's designed for Grid for iPad. So I'll just show you this is the Grid version on the PC, and you may or may not know, but Grid is particularly useful for learners who are using a particular method of access, specifically eye gaze or switches or direct selection, where you want nice big targets. So if I listen to this
is Inch. This is Grub.
And again, it's got a recording and a nice big button to turn the page.
Inch and Grub were cavemen. Inch and Grub lived in caves. Inch's cave was nice, but Grub's cave was bigger. Me have bigger cave than you, said Grub. That make me best. This made Inch cross. That not fair, he said.
And so we find these are quite helpful, because one of the challenges, I suppose, with things like Grid is finding appropriate curriculum materials to in the Grid format. So it's quite handy, I think, for some of the learners we're working with, if you can get them in the Grid format. Okay, so that's us looked at some of the different resources that are on the Books for All website. And the last one I want to mention is viewing the files on a Chromebook. So Robert, can you see what I hope is our
Yes.
Chrome remote desktop? Yeah?
Chrome remote desktop.
Yeah, jolly good. Okay, so this is one of the teenage books that I've downloaded to the Chromebook, and I'm viewing it. Now it gets a bit complicated here because it's a PDF. So I'm viewing it in an extension called Kami, which is free. And I've also got ClaroRead, which is a text reader in the top right-hand corner. And I'm hoping that when I tap the Chromebook and then click the green play button,
we arrive in Lochport on a Friday. A crappy day, a few days before my otherwise favourite holiday of the year, Halloween. We've been driving for about 8 hours, which in teenage years equates to about a week.
So I don't know, could you hear that, Robert? Was it coming through?
Yes, it's coming through fine.
The sound wasn't transferring to the PC. And then the voice there is one of the Scottish voices, which you can get as an Android app. So there's 3 different things going on here. There's the PDF reader, there's ClaroRead to read the PDF, and then the voice that's being used as an Android app. And I think Shirley is maybe popping in the links to all these. There are simpler ways of doing this, but getting a decent voice on a Chromebook is always a bit of a problem. So I thought we would demonstrate that. Okay, how are we doing for time? Right, so I will stop that. And we'll now go on to Bookshare. So Bookshare is run by RNIB, and if you're not already signed up to it, you really should be, because the Books for All website has got a relatively small number of files on it. Bookshare has got thousands in fact, 250,000, 750,000 now. And one of the reasons for that is because RNIB have got an arrangement with most of the UK academic textbook publishers. So they've got their original files from the publishers. And that's just absolutely fantastic, because we can do a search for a series, so Oxford Reading Tree, and apparently we've got 1,190 results here, so they've got probably everything. Or somebody asked me a few weeks ago if Books for All was going to get Lecky primary maths books, and I said, well, I would love to, but there's no real point, because you can get them from Bookshare. Or you could do a search for National 5 if you're in Scotland, and you'd get some 230 books apparently of National 5 textbooks. Or you could do a search for Hodder Gibson, quite a popular Scottish secondary book publisher, or a search for TJ. And we've got 358 of the TG files here. So RNIB Bookshare is great, and again, it's free service for people in the UK, and you can download books in a variety of formats. Most of them are PDF. There are some other formats as well, but most of them are PDF, and then open them up on your Windows machine or your Chromebook or your iPad. Now, one of the things that we need to mention is that on the iPad there's an app called Dolphin Easy Reader, and so I'll bring back my reflector. So this is Dolphin Easy Reader, and it links directly into RNIB Bookshare. So from within the app, you can actually search and find books, and then once it's in your on your iPad here, you can have it. You could change the colours and the background and the font, and you can also have it read out by the iPad.
Out. He exchanged dark looks with his wife, Petunia. Harry tried to argue back, but his words were drowned by long, loud, from the deaf son.
I think the delay that we've got here is probably caused by the multitude of Wi-Fi connections that we've got. But Easy Reader, apart from being linked directly into Bookshare, it also provides you with better tools for reading than the iPad Books app. So it's really good, and it's free. Bookshare is free, Dolphin Easy Reader is free, and so these are really just fantastic apps to have available to us. Okay, so our last example is the National Accessible Library. This is one of the services that pioneered the whole idea of accessible books for people with disabilities. And I've just done a search for Tally's Blood, which is I don't know if it still is, but it's certainly one of the popular plays that was used in secondary school in Scotland. And so you can, the National Accessible Library offers it in a variety of formats. We've got plain text and Microsoft Word, HTML, DAISY, grade 3 Braille even, grade 2 Braille. And I'll just go to the Word version. So this is it here. And one of the good things, of course, about getting files that are in a Microsoft Word format is that you can open up an immersive reader, which is you can kind of do that immersive reader with PDFs, but it depends on which device you've got. So in Word here, we can have it read out by the
Rosanella, Dorm, Luigi, C, Dorm Semper.
Not a great idea if you're trying to read the Italian in English. I suppose we could change the voice to. I won't do that now. However, you get the point. So that's a Word file downloaded from the National Accessible Library. And the last thing I wanted to mention was, one thing about the National Accessible Library is that It's a great place if you want to find novels. Not so much for textbooks. RNIB Bookshare is the place to go really for textbooks. But the National Accessible Library is great for children's literature and fiction. And as we say, it also provides them in a variety of format as well. So our last source of ebooks would be the commercial ebooks. And looking at the time, just a couple of things to say. Kindle, of course, is one of the primary purveyors of these things. And one of the good things about the Kindle books is that they're available with an audible narration. Now this means that you get a version of the book, and I'll just turn it on my iPad, which has got a human recording. So that rather than listening to the computer reading it out in a computery voice, then you get an actual human being doing the narration. So I'm hoping that you can see my iPad on the screen, and I'm going to try and get it to read. So this is Beetle Boy, and down the bottom we have a little play button.
Dad, who might be 5 minutes late picking you up from school, but he always came. More than anything else, Darkus knew his dad was not the kind of father who would abandon his 13-year-old son. The police report stated that the 27th of September had been an unremarkable Tuesday. He frequently would. Stone-cold cup of coffee sat with some papers on the table beside a microscope. Several coleopteras.
Okay, so and we don't have too much time to go into all these, but you can obviously buy books from the Apple Bookstore and from ebook online sources, and also from Kindle. And I think increasingly the commercial publishers will be creating accessible commercial versions of their textbooks, and then selling them through commercial routes. So that's definitely something to look out for. The other advantage of a Kindle book and buying a book for your iPad is that because it's not a PDF, you can make the text much bigger and it reflows to fit the screen. So for learners who require a larger font, then getting the Kindle version or the iPad version could be very helpful. Right, so I think that's it for us. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I'm hoping we can go back.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic, Paul. Thank you so much. There's so much information that you've covered there. There's just so many different options, and it's good to see exactly what the process was on the Books for All database for actually downloading and accessing a text on different devices. So thanks very much for showing that. I'm just having a look in the chat panel just now to see if there's any questions. I did pick up one earlier from Sorcha asking, can they be downloaded onto the grid? And I believe at that time you were looking at the BookBug picture books.
Let's just look at the chat. Yes. So we've got the grid files which you can open up as grid sets. So you just download them to your machine, look in downloads, and then open them up as a grid set directly into grid. Does that answer the question, Sorcha? Yeah.
Yep,
I mean, you could open up the PowerPoint version if you had a computer control set in the grid and work it that way. But it's so much easier if you can just open up the grid set, because then you know it fits, I think.
Good. If anyone else got any other questions just now, please do put them in the chat panel, and Paul will be happy to answer them. I could maybe ask you one meantime, Paul, just about the books from the database. It's one that I'm asked quite often when I've been delivering training. It's just about who can actually access the book. So if you were a parent of a child with dyslexia who would come into this print disabled category, are they able to go to the Books for All database and download a book for their child?
We only provide accounts for staff, really. And the reason for that is because of copyright. So if a parent needed access, then the mechanism would be to ask the member of staff that's working with your son or daughter in the school to to log into the database, get a link, and then send it to the parent or the student. And that sounds onerous, but we've had quite a lot of problems with books being downloaded and then just shared across Facebook, or no, actually, ironically, most of the time it's probably teachers who are doing the legal sharing rather than parents. But if we didn't have any control over it, then you would just get anybody, creating an account anywhere in the world, downloading the whole lot, and then sticking them up somewhere. And so it's the only mechanism we've got to protect. So the answer is no, parents can't get direct access, and neither can students. But you can ask for the member of staff that's supporting you could get a link and send it to you by email or by another method.
Good, thank you. A couple of questions in here just about asking you for your definition on print disability. And Robert's put in a very helpful link on that, but do you maybe want to just say about what disabilities does this encompass?
Well, for a brief time it was defined in the legislation, but it's now been superseded by the Marrakesh Amendment. But for us, a print disability means someone who is disabled. Now, that's defined in the Equality Act, so you don't need to have a diagnosis. It's an interpretation, but it does mean that who has a disability and is prevented by the disability from accessing and enjoying the work, the printed work is what they're normally referring to. So what that means in practice, as far as we're concerned, is that you could be someone who had a visual impairment, or a reading challenge, or a learning difficulty, or you could be on the autistic spectrum. I see Gillian's asking that that question. And if you have difficulty accessing a paper copy, the usual one that we are dealing with in the class, although less so nowadays, of course. But if by reason of your disability you have difficulty enjoying the paper copy, then you qualify as being print disabled, and you can download books, or member staff can download books from Books for All and from Bookshare and from the National Accessible Library. So developmental language disorder, which affects their literacy, yes, because that is a disability. The grey areas are learners who have got poor lower levels of literacy, and that's not a disability, and therefore they wouldn't be regarded as print disabled. Another grey area is English as an additional language. So if you have English as an additional language, then you're not disabled. Therefore, you don't have a print disability, unless you did have a print disability, of course, in which case you would. So EAL as in itself doesn't qualify, but if someone had EAL and a visual difficulty or an autism, or a dyslexia, then you would qualify. So it's kind of quite confusing, but does that make it clear, I hope?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it's good to say that the link that Robert has put in there will give some more information, but that was a good description of all the different pupils that would come into that category. So,
I mean, we've just got to be really careful, because as I say, we used to have books on Books for All. We used to have a stack of Hodder Gibson textbooks, TJ books, and textbooks from Bright Red. And none of them are there anymore because the publishers had too many examples of books being downloaded and shared illegally. And so, you know, it's great that Bookshare still has all these files, but I mean, they're only going to continue to be there if we as a community don't abuse the service that's being offered. So I saw somebody else was asking about whether the RNIB ones could write on. I think they're PDF files typically, so you should be able to download the PDF and open it up provided your PDF reader app lets you annotate and draw on the page, then yes. So you know, you can do that with books on the iPad, and you can certainly do it with Adobe Reader on a PC. On a Chromebook, not so easy. The best app, I think, for annotating PDFs on a Chromebook is Foxit PDF Reader, which isn't actually a Chromebook app; it's an Android one, and so it only works if if you can run Android apps on your Chromebook. The whole Chromebook thing's a bit of a shambles, I think.
No more questions coming in, but just some nice comments about how helpful it's been. So that's been great. And just a reminder to everyone that you'll get a recording of this session, so you can go back and look over things again, or perhaps share it with other people. And also the links that I've put into the chat panel will make sure that everybody gets a copy of them as well. Are you happy for me to end it now, Paul? Are you?
Oh, I think so. Yes.
Final
I hope
last
it was useful. Hope it was useful, and it is just such an important thing, isn't it? I mean, if students can't access the learning resources, then it makes it really difficult to learn. So apart from being a legal requirement, it's just so important for independence and for education in general. So thanks very much for attending, and I hope you have a good evening.